as an adult, the key is how can we first identify that, A, we are in this survival mode, we are in burnout, and how can we rewrite or unlearn or unpattern those beliefs, those habits?
When we are chronically and consistently disconnecting from ourselves and our body's feedback to us to earn our spot at the table or to be seen as worthy, lovable, or valuable, when we're constantly doing that, it's going to drive us to burnout.
All right. Welcome to the Alignus Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nikhil Sharma, and I'm so grateful to have you guys here with us today. And today's topic, we are going to be talking about how childhood conditioning leads to adult burnout. Joining me today is, as always, as my co-host, co-founder of Alignus and growth and mindset expert, Kevin Drevin. What's going on, brother?
How you doing? Good morning. Happy to be here. Ready to get into this and transform some lives.
Love it. And our guest today is a burnout specialist herself, Monica Helvey. Thank you for joining us today, Monica.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, guys.
All right. Well, look, burnout has been something that's always been near and dear to my heart. It's something that I've experienced. And, unfortunately, I experienced it in such a way that I had to crash and burn. But through that experience, I really wanted to make it a point of emphasis for people to understand what is burnout and how do they know when they're in burnout, so we can try to prevent others from going through a similar experience. Because I feel like now going into 2025, we're done with that whole crash and burn, and let's try to get out and be aware of burnout and our patterns and how we can prevent ourselves from, getting into these destructive ways of being. And so 80% of individuals actually experience burnout. That's quite a bit of our population. And so where does that, kind of begin with? It's those patterns of wanting to achieve, to seek approval, to suppress our emotions. All those patterns start at a very young age, during childhood and the conditioning we received during that time period. Those patterns then eventually run in our background and carry over into our adult life, where we can experience exhaustion and burnout. So my question is that what role does childhood conditioning play in how we manage our stress and balance in our adult life?
Yeah, I think it has such a tremendous correlation that so many people aren't giving it enough credit. We learn how to be with ourselves in relationships, in our careers, based off of how we learn to be with ourselves in relationships as children. So our caregiver is going to teach us how to be with big feelings. They're going to teach us, how do we know when we're feeling uncomfortable, when we're feeling unsafe, when we're feeling overwhelmed, when we're feeling tired? Our caregivers teach us how to pay attention to that by modeling that to us. And so when we're young, and I think back to even teenage Monica, I'm tired. I don't want to do this thing. I don't want to do this project. And when we have that reflected back to us as, well, too damn bad, or, oh, well,
Yeah.
pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or, just push through. When we learn to not pay attention to our own body's feedback, and we build that pattern and that process, that muscle of pushing through and just suck it up and get through it, that's where we start to build that habit, that burnout pattern that we will oftentimes take with us. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it can be an adaptive skill. Sometimes we do have to push through difficult times and experiences. But when we are chronically and consistently disconnecting from ourselves and our body's feedback to us to be productive, to be, to earn our spot at the table, or to be seen as worthy, lovable, or valuable, when we're constantly doing that, it's going to drive us to burnout.
That was so well said. And I was thinking about my own two children, and you nailed it when you said there are also obstacles that you do need to have these traits, such as perseverance. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as a parent, how do you set that boundary between, hey, like, this is something that may be tough, it may be uncomfortable, but if you really, really, truly just ground yourself and believe that you can and visualize that you can, it can truly be achievable. It just might not be easy. Versus, hey, I don't care if you like it or not. Like, you're going to this event. Like, I don't know what kind of plans you had at 5 o'clock, but they're not happening. You're going, right? To where now there's like, wow, like, I don't feel valued. Like, I feel unheard. I feel belittled, right? So it brings up that tough conversation of like, where, how do you identify when enough is enough, and being able to respect your child's boundaries, or teach them or model for them that it's okay to have boundaries and not to feel bad when you stand up for yourself and vocalize that you feel a certain way or a certain emotion.
And Kevin, I think you nailed it in the question. Like you were saying that like to see them and to acknowledge and to hear them, those are really important pieces. That's attunement.
Mm.
And so what so many of us geriatric millennials, is that what they're calling us now?
I don't
wait. Geriatric?
Yo,
I felt attacked when I heard that. Okay,
yes.
but this is the reality, y'all. What our reality was growing up is that we had caregivers that never learned to tune into their emotions because they had caregivers that never taught them about their nervous system and their emotions, and they were to be seen and not heard. So they were emotionally neglected, which then means that they didn't have the muscle for how to be emotionally attuned to us. Okay.
Right.
So I think that's why we're seeing such incredible numbers of burnout, is because we just never learned how to hold space for our own emotions, how to be with our own feelings and experiences, because they were never acknowledged or attuned to by our caregivers. So when you can acknowledge for your kiddo, hey, I understand this is a hard thing and I am with you. And there are some hard things that we need to push through, and there are some hard things that we can opt out of. Like, we don't have to be this busy if it's not aligned for you, right? Like, I think about the kids who are in, robotics and sports and, honors classes, like asking them, like, is this for you or not? Right. And then caring about the answer.
Yeah.
Right. And really just listening and attuning and saying, hey, maybe there's some of this we can take off your plate.
Yeah, I think that support that you're mentioning and that attunement, I'm just seeing how that was reflected in my life, or a lack of, because I feel like my parents, are typical of many millennials parents, where there was a lack of emotional regulation or intelligence, or really discussion about how we are feeling, or how to really validate our own selves, And so I think growing up, as a baby and as a kid, our form of survival is wanting to be loved and wanting to be accepted. That is all we are looking for at a young age. And so, based on the environment we're around, that can vary from each person and what that looks like. But for me, growing up in a South Asian household, it was like, Nick, you have to get a certain GPA in your life, and only when that occurred did I feel. Now, it may not obviously be true, and of course it's not true, but I was showered with love when I was getting like 4.0s, right? But then when I was getting like a 3.6, which, I thought was a pretty good, right? Like, I was like, that's not, it's a solid GPA, right?
Solid.
And so when I came home and I showed my parents that report card, I felt really excited. I was in some honors classes, AP classes. Their first attention went to that B that was there, right? Or the couple Bs that were there. And then you could see the sense of disappointment that ran across their face. And so, yeah.
Can I interrupt you? Okay.
Yeah, of course.
So the reason why that so deeply affects us as kids is because we're already in a pattern of taking care of our parents' emotions. We are already in a dynamic where we have learned, we as the child, as the emotionally mature child, I'm responsible for their joy. I feel a sense of duty, burden to them and their well-being. And
Yo,
so if they're
that's true.
disappointed, I'm now in danger, so I better step it up.
Yes, yes. And that's when that fight or flight starts kicking in and we're not
Absolutely.
able to like think properly. We start getting a brain fog and then we don't like sitting in those emotions or those feelings because who really
Right.
likes, especially as a kid, likes to
No.
sit in any kind of discomfort or pain, right? Like
Well,
that's
and your parents' disorganization, they're having
Mm.
dysregulation, them having mixed emotions is literally a threat to a child.
yes. And so what I did, and I feel like maybe many kids did, was like, all right, well, if this is not good enough, I need to make sure that I start people pleasing, and I need to make sure that I start fine tuning myself, and that's where things like
Yes.
perfectionism starts
Mm-hmm.
coming into play. That's when things like people pleasing, like we discussed, come into play, and that's when we start uh, developing this unhealthy relationship with the term failure
Right.
because I feel that when we are looking at certain situations and certain, I guess, for us, achievements, but periods of life where you're like, okay, you thought this was pretty good, but then to another person, it's deemed as a failure. So you're now in this complete like, all right, let me get out of this let me jump into survival mode, get out of this pain. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut off everything else, and I'm going to just focus on studying because this to me and for my survival and for my acceptance and for me to get love, I need to make sure I'm getting 4.0s. Friends
Yeah.
don't matter. Going out doesn't matter now. My balance is now
There's no
completely
balance. Yeah.
shifted. There's no
Mm-hmm.
balance. I've completely shifted my focus into studying. I remember like being up on the weekends, like studying for SATs in the ninth grade, like prior to taking them
Mm-hmm.
in the 11th grade, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you see,
Yeah.
so
You
our
found a
mindset.
way. How beautiful and brilliant of you, though. You
Yeah,
found a way to get those developmental needs met. For
yeah,
love and belonging, you found a way. And for you, it was through that GPA.
that's right.
And so it was a brilliant adaptation. And
Yes,
yet when we then take that with us into the workforce and we
yes,
still say my worth, my lovability, my value is contingent on my output,
yeah.
that's when we run into burnout, right? Like it's, how could we not? We bring ourselves everywhere we go.
That's exactly right. So that how that translated for those that are listening for me in the work world when I became a doctor, then I was wanting to make sure that I was proving myself as a great teammate. And so I would always, when they asked, pick up extra shifts. So like our schedule was work where I work 1 week on, 1 week off. So the week off, I should be using time to rest and digest and, get ready for the next work week. However, to be a team player, I felt like I needed to work on those weeks off because they needed help. And so
Yeah.
to prove my worthiness, I would then be like, all right, sure, I'll do it. I'm not married. I don't have any kids. What do I need rest for? So I'll just pick up that extra
Rest is a
week of work.
four-letter word to a high achiever.
Right. So,
Yeah.
and I just want to show you, just put that out there so you can see clearly how when I was at a young age where my worthiness was based on how good of my output was. And at that time, my output was based on what kind of scores I was having. And now my worthiness at work was deemed through how hard I could work and prove that I belonged in that system and belonged with the rest of my teammates in the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes so much sense that it translated to that. Right.
Right.
And this is what I want people to understand is like, you guys make so much sense. Like, of course that was the dynamic. You were first a helper and caregiver for your parents at home. Of course you were a helper and a team player and a giver at work. Like it just makes so much sense. There's nothing bad, broken, or damaged about you. It's just this was the muscle that you have been exercising since you were a child. Of course, that's going to be the muscle you rely on when you're older. But there are ways that we can unpattern that. And when we start to see, hey, this isn't working for me. Yeah, maybe I needed to do this back then, but do I really need to keep doing this now? When we get to that place, that's a really great place to be. Now we have some choice. Now we have some power. And that's where we can really start to make the difference and unpattern some of these things that are no longer adaptive to us as adults.
I was
Right.
today
Yeah.
when I first heard the word unpatterned, by the way. I love the
I
word.
I
love
might
it.
have made it up.
So much sense.
I love
No.
it. No.
Behaviors
I
are
don't know.
based on patterns. And the thing is, it's not to say that these behaviors are necessarily good or bad. It's just the fact that these behaviors exist based on what was modeled for you and created the structure from which you've now created your current self. But now you have the opportunity to unpattern your life, which you should write a book called Unpattern Your Life.
I agree. I love that.
A
No,
co
for real.
But seriously though, like just in the moment, right now, you guys have amazing backgrounds. Like Nick, you have your background with the tree. You have your background with everything just perfectly aligned. And now I'm here and I'm just like, I feel like left out. But because like we're recording, I'm like, I don't want to make any mistakes. Why don't I want to make any mistakes? Because I was conditioned as a child not to make mistakes, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, how could I re-pattern? I'm gonna grab this tree.
Yeah, there we go.
Jump in mid-video because like that's life. Like you just have to be
Yeah.
able to pivot and be open to messing up and then just correcting it and accepting it and forgiving yourself and not living in guilt. Because when you live in guilt, now you're attracting other things that are gonna make you feel more guilty. And I see Nick, like you're about to throw something.
No, I love what you're saying. I love what you're doing. I love the fact that we're talking about unpatterns because we are literally an operating system growing up. We are fed this data that's coming from our parents, that's coming from society, and that data is helping us, survive. And that's
Yeah.
the thing. Our settings from birth are just set to survival mode. And that is strictly based on the environment that you're around. Now, as you get older, those same settings are running in the background. They didn't go anywhere unless you had the time to, unpack those patterns. They're still running and we're still going. It's just go, 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 go. But now, as an adult, the key is how can we first identify that, A, we are in this survival mode, we are in burnout, and how can we rewrite or unlearn or unpattern those beliefs, those habits, right? Of wanting to feel worthy and feel loved and accepted by the amount of work we are putting in to a situation.
Yeah, such a powerful question. We can't change anything we're not aware of. And so that's where it really becomes difficult is we have to first have an awakening and really start to acknowledge maybe this isn't working. And so for some people, unfortunately, that's after they've hit the point of complete exhaustion and burnout. My hope is that folks are stumbling upon this podcast. They're hearing this message before then, but it takes an awakening, a reality check, a gut check. And when we're saying, is this really all there is to life, is just producing and performing, and what is even the point of all of this? Like when we have that realization or that awakening, then we can start to look at our belief systems and our patterns and why we are doing what we're doing and how is it actually serving us. So having that first initial awareness is key, right? You can't change anything you're not aware of. So that's first and foremost. And so beyond that, the next step is then going to be, okay, now that I have awareness of what's going on, with curiosity and compassion, that has to lead the way. Curiosity and compassion has to lead the way. Because if we're looking at ourselves and saying, oh, I made a mistake, I'm bad, I'm broken, I'm a screw up, why am I like this? First of all, that's a shame spiral that is going to put you in fight or flight mode.
Yes.
So you can't really do that deeper unpatterning work when you're in an activated nervous system. Your entire survival defaults are going to put you into just surviving the tiger attack, so to speak, right? So if we are curious and compassionate about our processes and why these things developed in the first place, that's where we can really, with internal permission, start to look at these patterns and change and shift the ways that we're relating to the world around us. But those two steps have to exist first before we can really have these big breakthroughs that we, are hungry for.
Yeah, I that curiosity and compassion, that's a big step. And what you mentioned right before that about that negative spiral that starts occurring, because
Mhm.
when you first recognize that, hey, I just effed up, oh my God, your thoughts start going into this really dark place, and you want to
Mhm.
try to do everything you possibly can, because again, you're in survival mode, to fix those thoughts or to fix the situation that's in front of you. And when you're in that negative spiral, your brain is a complete fog. Just picture
Mhm.
yourself like banging a knee on a table. You just banged your head, on on a wall, just for saying that wall is that trauma that just occurred. So naturally at that time, you're not thinking so well. It's very cloudy, and so we just often think at that time we need to hurry up and do something, when really at that time, it's a good time for us to just maybe sit back, you know fully absorb and think about what has just gone wrong, and then open ourselves up to possibilities of how we can maybe improve ourselves going forward, and like you
Mhm.
said, that process doesn't just happen within a 24-hour period, right? It's not
Mhm.
impulsivity. You have to have some patience, you need to have some endurance and understanding, like, the way that I've been doing things before hasn't really worked. You have to almost have this acceptance, and I feel that's a really important thing for people to understand is, to first have this surrender, and then having an acceptance that, what, I think that there has to be another way of doing things, and I'm going to go and find what that way is, and that's going to
Yeah.
help me propel me to get out of this survival mode that I'm in all the time, into a more thriving mode.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's again, we have to be willing to practice some self-honesty and some radical responsibility, and so in your words, like surrender and acceptance, it's like, okay, now what am I going to do with this awareness? Now what am I going to do with this information? And it doesn't have to be in a way where we're shaming ourselves and like, oh, I have to do this as fast as possible. It's like, well, no, I can take some mindful intentional steps towards the goal, um, but recognizing like shaming myself isn't going to get me there faster.
Right.
And you said it again, recognizing. So I think you said in the beginning, like, where does someone start? And I would say that that comes down to reflection, right? Because if you're not thinking and you're not taking the time to recognize how you're feeling, or recognizing like if you're feeling uncomfortable or comfortable in different situations, you're not going to be able to make the changes. So being able to reflect so you could recognize, right? And then from that point, now it's like, okay, is this serving me or not serving me? And I guess that would be another R, would be, okay, if it doesn't serve me, be willing to release it. Because like Nick said, like, you need to be open, and you can't be open if you're full, right? So if you
Mm-hmm.
think of like a canister of like water, or juice, if you're at capacity, like, how are you going to absorb anything? Because you're full. So you have to literally recognize it and just begin releasing the things that no longer serve you. And then at that point, now you can take on the things that do serve you and really see that transformation. So I think you guys gave the steps and something that's really actionable for people to literally do today, and just stop, reflect, recognize, release, and
Mm-hmm.
just be willing to like do those steps in that order with no kind of emotional return. Because again, if you're feeling guilty about it, like, oh well, I've always done this for this person, I mean, they depend on me, right? You talked about that dependence that parents have kind of conditioned, is like their happiness is dependent upon what I do. So being able to release those things, and I know, and I can speak personally, it is transformation when you begin taking out those behaviors from your life that don't serve you or the people that you care about. Because now you're saying, I love myself enough to release these behaviors and
Mm-hmm.
recognize that these things are no longer serving me. And that's true self love.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah, and so before we, I guess wrap up the podcast, I just wanted to ask you, what and one challenge that I know I face, and I think many people do face, is when they are trying to get out of this burnout and they're now going through understanding and reflection, and they're becoming aware of what needs to happen. You know, what is that like, second actionable step that people can take once they want to make that change? Is that, setting boundaries, and then what comes with boundaries, right? Like there's a lot of kickback that may occur, or is it their relationship with, their own way of being, like the way that they look at that it's okay to relax, because when we're growing up, we're always taught that success is equal to productivity, and productivity equals work. So you have to be working all the way until like the day you die. I mean? Like, I feel like there's like this, right? Like there's like this a pattern that's been inbred in us, that having any kind of relaxation is like considered a weakness. And so I'm just wondering your thoughts on a couple of actionable steps that people can take, and what to expect, when they take those steps.
Well, so I think the first step has to start way before boundaries and way before resting, because to your point, it is literally something they have spent generations believing is dangerous. So, setting a boundary when you grew up having to please, protect, or care for the emotions of your caregivers is going to feel really scary, right? So this is oftentimes, again, a lot of programs start with setting boundaries and time management and and I think that's great information and needs to be had. But before that, the first step is you've got to be able to come home and learn to orient and attune to your nervous system.
Yeah.
That is going to help you align to, what are my values? What do I need to set boundaries with? Where are my energy leaks? For so many high achievers with burnout, they don't have a sense of themselves. They don't know what they like. They don't know what they're interested in. They don't know when they're tired. They don't know when they're overworked. They're just motoring. And so for them, they have to be able to come back into their nervous system, have an attention to that, have some sense of that. And then they can start to know, oh, this is an energy leak. Oh, I'm tired. Oh, I'm in fight or flight mode. Oh, I need to set a boundary. I need to use a coping skill. I need to take a day off. It's only after you learn how to do that will you be able to do the other stuff with ease and without fear and without shame and guilt and all of that stuff. So coming home to yourself, learning how to attune to yourself is the beginning work of all of that.
Yeah. I just love talking to you, because I just learned so much, and I'm thinking about like energy leaks and what drains my energy and who drains my energy, and what that is. And that type of stuff is the type of work we need to be doing on ourselves. And the hardest thing we do in this life is to work on ourselves. It's easy for us to work
the
on
work
other
we spend
things.
our lives avoiding.
Exactly. We work our whole life avoiding ourselves and avoiding what's best for us, when we should be so focused on loving ourselves. Like, do we not care about who we are?
No, but this is what our parents did to us. Like, there was emotional neglect in childhood. So of course we don't pay attention to ourselves. Of course we avoid ourselves.
Oh,
it's just like the most obvious answer and the most obvious thing, and it's like the thing we do the least, which is just so mind blowing. Even to myself, still thinking about it, I'm always still like, I've gotten much better at it, but it's just funny how, like, life catches up with you. We go back into this autopilot mode very frequently, and we're just like, oh yeah, I got to go take care of the kids. I got to do this. I got to do that. Oh, by the time the day ends, again, we're exhausted. We're drained. So I love that you're saying that you need to take some time in the day. I like to wake up in the mornings, around 6 o'clock in the morning. I like to meditate, spend 10 minutes listening to myself, listening to what it is that's going on in my body. I like to do a body scan, and I like to journal.
When she said attuning, you literally do it every single morning, and that's why you can be efficient. But continue.
No, that's it. Exactly. Things like meditation, and things like journaling. I like to journal in the morning, and then I like to write my gratitude list. But things that are maybe on my mind, and then in the evening time, I like to do a self-reflection. I feel like when I do that self-reflection in the evening time, that's really where I put the whole day together and what's going on. This morning I noticed myself feeling really tired. and I think that has to do with the lack of sleep I had the night before. Why was I having a little bit of lack of sleep the night before? It's because, I was on my phone too late at nighttime, or I was watching TV. So maybe tonight before I should shut off my phone at 7 o'clock, so that I'm able to get better sleep. So I'm more fresh in the morning, to be able to attack our day. So just things like this, I would say, go a long way in order to attune ourselves to what's going on inside us. You have to really cut the distractions off for some time period and just focus on yourself. And the answers and the guidance that you need will come to you.
Yeah. Your inner wisdom will show up. It will. Your intuition will show up, but you've got to clear the noise. I love that, Nick. So good.
And for the people that come in and say, well, that sounded like it took a lot of time, right there, like, have one phrase, right? Just one phrase. Say no to others so you can say yes to yourself. You have to be able to create that time for yourself. You have to be able to say no. So that way you have the time to be intentional in the morning, intentional in the day, and intentional in the evening. When you're saying no to others, it may be uncomfortable, but now you're saying yes to yourself. And again, that is a huge form of self-love. And that's how you can create the life that we're discussing right now, an intentional life where you're analyzing and seeing what doesn't serve you. But it begins by just say no to others so you can say yes to yourself.
All right. Well, look, this was an incredible conversation. I mean, we are very, very blessed today to be with Monica. And for those that are interested in her services, we will put a link down in the description to be able to contact her, to be able to set up an appointment with her, to meet her. She is truly an incredible soul, an incredible being. She knows exactly how to guide us on your journey through burnout and lead you to a state of being where you're not surviving, but you're literally thriving.
That's a bar.
Thank you.
All right. Well, look, until next time, peace and love.